A horror series that once defied indie horror game by using unnatural settings is now called a joke and a cash grab by the horror media. What started as a claustrophobic nightmare of survival turned into a neon-colored amusement park with bugs that made the game just unplayable.
Give me in! Freddy! Freddy, you bitch! Freddy!
Maybe you were there when the franchise started expanding. The story got more complex. And added more mechanics, but the fear? It was still there. But then things started changing. The game got bigger, the story got messier, and before anyone knew it, Freddy Fazbear is not even in the new games. So what happened? How did FNAF go from one of the scariest games ever made to something that barely feels like horror anymore? And more importantly, does FNAF still have any fear left? FNAF 1 didn't start as a massive franchise or even as a guaranteed success. It was born out of failure. Scott Cawthon had made a few family-friendly games that were unintentionally unsettling. When the critics pointed out that his characters looked more like creepy animatronic robots than friendly mascots, he decided to lean into that fear instead of fighting it. And that's how Five Nights at Freddy's was created. What made FNAF 1 stand out was its simplicity. Locked in a small, dimly lit office, you were trapped between two doors and a limited amount of power to keep yourself safe. It was different from all the horror games during its time. Games such as Amnesia and Slender Man would have the player running away from the entity, but in FNAF, the entities would come to you. No running, no fighting back, it was just pure survival. And that lack of control is what made it terrifying. Every action had consequences. Checking the cameras drained power, keeping the door shut too long left you defensive later, and the animatronics moved unpredictably, forcing you to constantly check and recheck your surroundings. The game created fear not through loud noises or scripted scares, but through anticipation, something the later games would strive away from. This, combined with the claustrophobic setting, made every night feel like a tense, strategic battle to survive until 6 AM.
That beginning didn't count. Now you gotta look at you! Yes! Mother of God! I am the king of Five Nights at Freddy!
Fast forward to 2021, the hype of this new Five Nights at Freddy's game was way more than the previous ones. The game kept getting delayed, and it finally had a release date of December 16.
Release date! Oh my God! December release date!
Maybe it was pressure keeping the devs away from polishing it before release, but this was one of the most biggest disasters in FNAF history. Instead of being stuck in one place, you now control a child named Gregory, trapped inside the massive Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. Unlike past games, you can move freely, hide, and even use Freddy himself as a safe place. On paper, this sounds like a natural evolution. More mobility, more options, and more ways to survive. But in practice, these changes completely shift the game's tone. Instead of being trapped, you now have an entire mall to explore. The biggest issue was the lack of consequences. In FNAF 1, one mistake meant instant death. In Security Breach, getting caught is frustrating, but it's rarely terrifying.
I did 2 blues in a row. I hate this game!
And it's not even the jump scares themselves. In fact, I think these jump scares are way better than some of the earlier ones, like, what the fuck is this Foxy jump scare? So when we compare the two games side by side, the difference is obvious. FNAF 1 was about survival, Security Breach is about exploration. The game gives you no instructions sometimes, and when they do, they explain it for 5 minutes straight and don't say it again.
I need a green.
Use the service elevators at the...
So, did y'all get that? I need a... I can't even remember what I need. I need to take the elevator to Roxy to get a fast pass to get a phaser blaster.
The first game kept players on edge with its limited tools and high stakes. The latest entry gives you more control, but in doing so, loses what made the original so terrifying. Now, does all of that mean Security Breach is a bad game? Not necessarily. I mean, I have 40 hours into that game, I can't really say anything. But it's not a horror game in the same way FNAF 1 was, and that's where the series started to lose its fear factor. One of the things that made FNAF 1 so effective was how balanced the difficulty felt. It didn't start off as impossible, but it also didn't hold your hand. Each night got a little harder, giving you time to adapt and figure out the animatronics patterns. And by night 5, things did get intense, but it never felt unfair. If you messed up, you usually knew why. And the structure made sense. You had 5 nights and 5 difficulty curves. Each night felt like its own challenge. You weren't just thrown into chaos, you were built up to it, which made surviving each night feel much more rewarding. Security Breach though, it flips that structure completely. Instead of 5 separate nights, you're stuck on one long night, run around the Pizzaplex doing missions. And the difficulty, it's all over the place. And the animatronics can fucking teleport! Take the boss fights for example. These were so bad to the point where when Steel announced that they fixed the Vanny boss fight, the community had a scavenger hunt trying to find out what this supposed Vanny boss fight was. And apparently the boss fight was this scene. Missed it? They fixed this boss fight by adding the actual fucking boss. This confused a lot of people because there's no boss to fight, even before the patch. But it wasn't just Vanny. The only real boss fight in this game is Monty's. Both Chica's and Roxy's boss fight are just cutscenes that really don't require you to actually fight them, and it's more like a fetch quest that leads up to the fall of both of them. And the AI is all over the place. Here's how the FNAF 1 AI works, explained by yours truly. Every night, each animatronics has an AI level. This can go from 0, which means they cannot move, to 20, which means they're the most difficult to deal with. That's what makes the max mode of 420 so difficult. The animatronics have a set timer each night. Every time the timer runs out, the game auto-generates a number between 1 to 20, and if the animatronic's AI level is equal or greater than the generated number, it will move. However, if the AI level is lower than the generated number, it will stay in place. In Security Breach though, the AI feels random. Sometimes they'll spot you from across the room, and other times you can just walk right past them. The save station doesn't help either. In FNAF 1, you didn't have to save, you either survived the night or you didn't. However, in Security Breach, you rely on these save stations, and near the end, it removes them entirely, meaning you have to do entire sections again if you mess up, which doesn't really make sense. Not because the game is hard, it's just that it makes it inconvenient. And it's weird because most of Security Breach is actually easier than FNAF 1. Animatronics move slower, cameras don't matter as much, and the open world nature gives you plenty of ways to escape. But when the game does get hard, it's usually because of the weird design choices, not the smart AI. So what's the takeaway here? FNAF 1 challenged you by making every decision count. Security Breach tries to be challenging, but ends up feeling inconsistent. It's not about skill anymore, and it's more about patience. And when a horror game stops being hard and starts being frustrating, it loses a lot of its impact. FNAF 1's design kept things simple but effective at the same time. The setting of the game was something no one was used to. I mean, sure, we had games that took place in a forest or a sewer,
It's a giant red dildo.
but never in a pizzeria. I mean, when's the last time a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic tried to kill you? The game didn't need over-the-top visuals because the setting did enough. The animatronics weren't designed to look cool. They looked wrong, stiff, outdated, and somewhat friendly. And this design style for the first 4 games, shit, even all the games up to Security Breach, stuck with FNAF's core. Bonnie standing at the door, completely motionless, was scarier than any chase scene could ever be. Even the cameras felt hostile. The static with poor quality, making it so that you could only see Freddy's haunting silhouette. This style was what made FNAF FNAF, and is what created the hype in general. And Security Breach decided to go completely off track. I don't know why. Security Breach had bright neon lights, a massive mall, and animatronics that looked like they're headlining a concert. The Pizzaplex is impressive, sure, but it doesn't scream horror, and it feels more like an arcade you'd visit on the weekends. The animatronics reflect that change too. The new cast of Monty, Chica, Roxy, and Freddy
Freddy, you're supposed to be on lockdown.
Go cry about it, bitch.
are more like mascots than actual threats. Even Freddy, the big scary bear, is now your guide, and it's hard to be scared when the scariest character is giving you hints and letting you hide inside him. Pause. And because the game world is so big, it loses that sense of claustrophobia. I mean, I was scared of FNAF because of that claustrophobic sense in FNAF 1 and that openness in FNAF 2. But Security Breach could never find the perfect world between these two. You always have somewhere to run. I mean, sure, the mall looks great, but it's hard to feel cornered when you've got multiple escape routes. And none of this means that Security Breach has a bad design. It was just designed for a different kind of game. A kind of game that the community was never promised. Something we'll go into later. Now, this is a chapter that is the most controversial. I've had to rewrite and look back at this chapter so many times, and I'm not too experienced with the lore as much as some other people, so some of this might be wrong. But I feel like that's what Security Breach did wrong. The Scott games were never straightforward with the lore, but everyone at one point came to an agreement. Mike is the brother in the Foxy mask, Purple Guy is William Afton, Toy Chica is William Afton. The game never outright told you about the missing children, or the murders, or who was behind the mask. You had to figure that out by yourself, by noticing things like the newspaper clippings on the wall, or that eerie laugh that sounded just human enough to be unsettling. And when you did start connecting the dots, it made the game feel way darker than the surface level jump scares. Now obviously the lore for the first 7 games is not fully solved yet. There have been multiple new games, a movie, and 10 more goddamn. But fast forward to Security Breach and the story couldn't be more different. Instead of a mysterious background, the plot is front and center. You play as Gregory trying to escape the Pizzaplex while uncovering the mysteries of the location. Freddy talks, the villains keep ranting, and there's so much dialogue that it feels like a completely different genre. The parts where the game does explain the story makes it seem obvious, but it's quite the opposite. This game, along with some previous non-Scott Cawthon games, have this issue. They rely on the books connected with the games. And sure, Scott did use a novel trilogy for the lore, but it was never the main driving factor in figuring out the story. And the problem isn't just that the story is more confusing, it's that it's messy. Characters like Vanny, who are hyped up as major threats, barely show up, and Gregory as well. It's never explained why he doesn't have a home, or why Vanny is after him. To make things worse, Security Breach tries to tie itself to the older games without really committing. There are callbacks and mentions of the old animatronics, but they're just kind of there, and they don't add to the horror, and they're just Easter eggs for the fans. So while FNAF 1 kept things vague and let players theorize and have a more collective system, Security Breach spoon feeds you a confusing plot that's more style than substance. It's not that FNAF can't have a clear story, it's that when you take away the mystery and add confusion, you take away a huge part of what made the series scary in the first place. Security Breach's launch was a mess, and there's really no other way to put it. From constant delays to a buggy unfinished release, it felt like the game wasn't ready, but it had to come out anyways. Players were hyped, especially after all the trailers, but what they got was complicated. And that's because the trailers promised something completely different. If you watched them, you'd think Security Breach was going to be one of the darkest FNAF games yet. The marketing was filled with eerie visuals, a serious tone, and characters that seemed like they would play a major role in the story. But when the game finally released, a lot of that just wasn't there. One of the biggest changes was Vanny. The trailers made her seem like this looming, dangerous character that stalks you throughout the pizzeria, waiting to strike. She was hyped up as the main villain, the next terrifying antagonist in the series, but in the final game, she barely shows up. She has a runtime of 2 minutes in total. She's in a few short sequences and has almost no development. It's like she was meant to be a huge threat, but they got cut at the last minute. And there's Vanessa. Yeah, she's the same character as Vanny, but she was supposed to be a key part of the story. The trailers made her seem like she would be actively trying to help you escape the pizzeria.
Gregory, we can get you out of here. You and me together. They won't stop hunting you. None of them will stop hunting you. We have to get you out by morning.
Whether that is Vanny trying to convince Gregory, but who the fuck knows at this point. But in the final release, her role is incredibly limited, and most of her backstory is left unexplored, except for the CDs. And that might be explained in the later games, but definitely not this one. And it was revealed when it was announced that Scott Cawthon was the one directing the trailers, not Steelwool. So the trailers were showing us Scott's vision for the game, not the reality of what was actually being made. Once development ran into issues, a lot of those ideas had to become cut or watered down, and that's why Security Breach ended up feeling so different from what the fans expected. Not only was the game rushed, but fans weren't expecting a better game, they were expecting a completely different game. A game with a darker tone, a more involved story, and threats that actually felt like threats. Instead we got something that tried to be that, but ultimately fell short due to time constraints and cut content. That's what made my experience with Security Breach so unique. I joined the community late, in 2023, after most of the game's major bugs had been patched by now. By that time, the game was way more stable, so I didn't go through any of the nightmare that was the launch day experience. But after playing through all the older FNAF games to catch up, I finally understood why people were so upset. The older games thrived on tension and mystery. Security Breach, for all its fun moments, just didn't have the same grip. And yet, despite everything I said in this video, Security Breach is still my favorite in the series. It has a soft spot in my heart. And yeah, it's messy and it's not as scary as other games, but there's something about it that I genuinely love. To me, the glitchiness was sometimes funny and gave the game its own charm. It wasn't perfect, but it was fun. And sometimes that's enough. The answer to why FNAF lost its fear factor is pretty clear. It wasn't just one thing, it was a mix of shifting design choices, inconsistent difficulties, changes in storytelling, and a rushed development cycle. That said, this doesn't mean FNAF is doomed to never be scary again. I mean, look at Ruin and Secret of the Mimic. The franchise is constantly evolving, and Security Breach proved that it's still willing to experiment. Maybe future games will find a balance between the open world gameplay and the horror that made the series iconic. Maybe they'll lean back into mystery, making threats feel more unpredictable, or bring back the limited controls that made the original games terrifying. Whether FNAF regains its fear factor or not, one thing is certain: this series isn't going anywhere. It's bigger than ever, and as long as people keep playing, it's only a matter of time before it tries to scare us again.